The idea of don't be foolish. This for me was a series of lessons out of Proverbs that I thought might fit into what you guys are doing on Wednesday night. And just this statement to start, there is simply no way to calculate the destructive power of adultery. I know that there are topics that are much more uplifting and encouraging, but I think sometimes, just talking about the joy of our fellowship together and all the wonderful things that we enjoy as a church family, I want to tell you this sin is so disruptive, so painful. And in fact, God took this sin so seriously that the law of Moses called for death by stoning for both parties involved, Deuteronomy 22:22. I think about in the New Testament, in the Gospel of John, the woman caught in the act and the accusation again. The law of Moses commanded, that we stone such people. Why is it so serious? I think God knew that this sin would undermine the family structure, that it would undermine society in a way that nothing else could. And he knows that adultery is a sin that captivates people in almost like no other. Many of us have seen people risk and in some cases lose everything that was so precious to them. You probably know some people. They destroyed their marriage, their family, their reputation, their job, their close fellowship, their relationship with God, all because of an infatuation with someone who is not their spouse. And we're going to look at four. I tried to give you an outline so you know the verses we're going to be looking at and just kind of the course that we're going to follow tonight. This book underlines the seriousness of adultery by speaking repeatedly and directly about this sin and its consequences. And I'm thankful for the way God's Word does that, directly, in ways that we can all understand. It addresses the consequences and pleads with the young man to follow the path of wisdom, a path that leads away from adultery. No one should be foolish about this sin. It's just so dangerous. And so we're going to look at these four primary passages. If you want to start with the first text, Proverbs 2, 16 through 19. This text tells the young man what will happen if he pursues and follows wisdom. Now, if you'll listen to wisdom, right? So you'll be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God, for her house sinks down to death. Her paths to the departed, none who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. That word translated by the English Standard Version as forbidden in verse 16, it literally means strange. The woman is strange in the sense that she's someone other than his wife. Verse 17 points out her sins. Number one, she forsakes the companion of her youth, her husband, and she forgets her covenant with God. It's not just a covenant. In marriage, it's not just a covenant that we make with another person. It's a covenant that we make with God. What God has joined together, man is not supposed to rip apart. Adultery is a complex sin, but here's what happens. People who are guilty of it often make this argument. You probably heard this. We're consenting adults, and what we're doing, we're not hurting anybody. What I want to say tonight about that is that's just not true. It's not true. We're grown-ups. What we do, privately isn't anybody else's business, and we're not hurting anybody. There's a lot of hurt connected with this behavior. First of all, the adulterer sins against the other person involved in the relationship. It is impossible to engage in an adulterous relationship without leading the other person in that relationship into sin. I listened to this a long time ago. It was a preacher that I really liked to listen to, and he talked about his own battle with sexual purity. It was back in college. His now wife at that time, they were just dating, but he explained how in that relationship, every line they crossed made it a little easier to cross the next, and they had gone too far. And she came one night and she said to him, "I can't even pray." And in the lesson, he said it just struck him, for her to be engaged to me meant that she had to disengage from God. Nobody's getting hurt. You're sinning against the other person. You're sinning against the adulterer sins against his or her own spouse and the spouse of the other person. You've made that she's sinning against her husband, the covenant she made with God. Notice this, their children. I think the name of the book is Primal Loss. And adult survivors of divorce speak. And it's not a scientific study. It's just people who grew up in a home broken by adultery, and years later, and they say, well, people say, our kids just want us to be happy, or young people are resilient, and now they're looking back, and they were kids, now they're talking about how that just ripped their world apart. How devastating that was. I'll never forget, as a young preacher, my wife and I visiting one of the ladies in the congregation, two little girls. Her husband had left the house. He wasn't coming back. Those little girls weeping. Their father had run off with another woman. He wasn't coming home. Nobody gets hurt. We're just having fun. The parents of both people involved in the relationship. I remember a very close, and I don't think it's fair to call his name, but very close, godly preacher from around this area. Everybody in Oklahoma would know him, and his son went through a devastating divorce. He said, "I don't think I ever went through anything quite so painful." We talk about, in the Old Testament, God hates divorce. And one of the best things I heard about that, a lesson that Bruce McClarty said, if one of my kids had cancer, I'd hate cancer because of how much it was hurting my kid. I think when we hear God say, "I hate divorce," he's not saying, "I hate divorced people." He's saying, "I hate what divorce does to people that I love." This sin, first and foremost, is against God. And you think about, right, David and Bathsheba, Uriah the Hittite, all the hurt that goes into that. You read these stories in the Old Testament, a man after God's own heart. Uriah had parents. We don't get all the details of what, but David's selfishness in this adulterous relationship, how it devastated so many people. And what does he say? Yes, he sinned against Bathsheba, Uriah, others involved, but he says, "I've sinned against you only have I sinned and done what is evil or wicked in your sight." And then ultimately, you're sinning against your own body. You're sinning against yourself. And to look at that and say, well, it's just people, adults, they're just innocent, it's fun, there's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. And on that last point, I think it's in harmony with what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6:18 when he says, "Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against their own body." And not only is adultery a violation of another person, it's a violation of one's own personhood as well. We weren't created for that kind of behavior. Listen again to this warning from Proverbs 2:19. "None who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life." The statement outlines the consequences of surrendering to the embrace of what Proverbs calls a strange woman. Once the person starts down that road, listen, redemption is still possible. But the destruction it does to the adulterer's life, the devastation to others touched by that sin. I just was preparing for another sermon, and there's a book, Lessons to Young Men. I think it's Bishop J.C. Ryle. And he has a line in there that says something to this effect: the sins that haunt the conscience of an old man are the sins that he committed when he was a young man. Does that mean you can't be forgiven? That's not what he's saying. He's saying we have to live with the memory of some of the things we've done, and that can be hard even after we've been saved by the blood of Jesus. Don't be foolish about adultery. The second text comes from Proverbs chapter 5, and I'm just kind of borrowing from verse 1 through 23. We're not going to read all of these, but that's the context. So serious and dangerous is the sin of adultery. The entire 5th chapter here is devoted to it. It begins with this: my son, be attentive to my wisdom, and incline your ear to my understanding. What follows is of extreme importance and seriousness. The reader needs to listen carefully. Again, the text speaks of the forbidden woman. The quality of forbiddenness is what seems to draw people into it. It's funny, the idea of the aspect of forbiddenness. The fact that it's something you can't have. I don't know why this just popped into my head. It's not wise to throw these in there, but I was leaving the hospital the other day, and there was a sign, do not climb on or sit on. And I was like, I never even thought about it until I saw the sign. Now I really want to climb on that and sit on it. There's something about the forbidden that creates a curiosity, an unhealthy curiosity. Verses 1 through 6 acknowledge the appeal and the deceptiveness of adultery. The forbidden woman's lips drip honey. Her words are smoother than oil. But notice this: but in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Eventually her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path to Sheol. Following her is not a good idea. Verses 7 through 14 offer the surest deterrent here. Keep your way far from her. Don't go near to the door of her house. Don't do it. Don't play this game of trying to see how close you can get to the forbidden thing without doing it. I had read somewhere that kind of the river stream leading up to Niagara Falls, that there's literally somewhere along that, the path leading up, there's a point of no return. If you cross that point, you're going over. And I think that can apply to a lot of sin. But I'm telling you, the appeal of sexual sin, the strength of that current, and we're gonna float along here. We're going to turn back, but we're just going to kind of go along with it. And sooner or later, what you find is the current of that appeal and attraction becomes stronger than what you can resist, and you go too far. And so this idea of don't even go near to the door of her house. You keep far away from her. It's easier to stay away from temptation than to walk away once you've gotten involved. Now, we're talking about adultery. We're talking about sexual sin tonight, but I want to tell you, I think there are people that meet at our building every Saturday at 10 o'clock. We have a recovery program. They tried something. They found that it had a great appeal and a power over their lives. And now they've spent a great deal of time trying to get out of something they wish they would have never gotten into in the first place. Don't ever peek behind the curtain. You say, well, I'm going to try it, but then this one, I just want to experience it. The best way to protect yourself is to listen to the wisdom of God's inspired words. Stay away. Don't put yourself at risk. Walking away might require some drastic steps or measures. If you're being tempted by this sin, that the wisest, the safest course. What does that translate into today? Get as far away from the source of that temptation as you can, and do it as quickly as possible. I've read all kinds of books about marriage and counseling, and no affair, hardly any adulterous relationship begins with the people saying, let's have an adulterous. They start to flirt. They spend too much time talking to someone who is not their spouse. They start making phone calls, sending text messages, and then eventually they start to develop stronger feelings. Listen, get away from that. If you ever sense that you have started, you're thinking about somebody during the day other than your spouse, and wondering, I wonder if she's going to be there. I wonder if he'll be at that meeting today. You're already heading in a very dangerous direction. According to verses 7 through 15, that this sin is the sad result of ignoring the wise teaching given earlier in life. He says, and you say, how I hated discipline, and my heart despised reproof. I didn't listen to the voice of my teachers or incline my ear to my instructors. I'm at the brink of utter ruin in the assembled congregation. The adulterer ends up wondering, why didn't I listen? Of concern here is not simply what happens to the man's family, his job, his reputation, but what his sin costs him in his relationship to his standing with God's people, with God. You just look at that, and God's word is so powerful. Many of us have had experiences where we thought to ourselves, why did I do that? Why did I listen? Why was I so hard-headed? Why did I press forward when I knew what the consequences might be? Verses 15 through 20 offer another deterrent to adultery, something more positive. Enjoy the spouse that you have. Paul says something about that, 1 Corinthians 7, 2 through 5. Because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Notice, do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again. Notice, so that Satan may not tempt you through a lack of self-control. But Paul's primary goal in those verses is to help Christians avoid sexual immorality, and healthy sexual relationship in marriage is an important deterrent to that sin. Proverbs 5 goes even further. The writer doesn't just say have a healthy relationship, but he encourages a young man, drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. I think that's a poetic way of saying the same thing that Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7. Let your fountain be blessed. Rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. In other words, enjoy your spouse instead of chasing after someone else. It's amazing how little effort some people put into to having a great marriage, having a great relationship. I was a young preacher just starting out in ministry. I met this little old couple, and the man said, I take my wife with me everywhere I go. And I thought, that is really sweet. And he said, that way I never have to kiss her goodbye. And I thought, well, that's kind of mean. You know, well, if you have a relationship like that with your spouse, that's the relationship you built. Why don't you build a better one? Why don't you create a relationship that you actually enjoy? I've met married people that, why did they marry? They don't seem to like each other. Well, why in the world? I'm started on another joke, and I thought I better not tell it. I probably shouldn't have told that one. Apparently, there was a book in 1983, The Myth of Greener Grass. And this idea that it's going to be, for some reason, the relationship with somebody else is going to be more rewarding than the relationship I already have with my wife. And what he talks about is all of the effort, all of the energy and creativity and money that people pour into having this exciting affair. He said, well, what would happen to your marriage if you put the same effort and energy and tried to bring some of the same excitement into the relationship you already have? Usually the problems a person has in one marriage are going to be carried over to another. I mean, listen, in marriage, it's not always the other person. Sometimes the problems that we're having, it's not her. It's me. And if we were to leave this relationship for another, we're taking part of the problem with us. I want you to look at verses 21 through 23. They present another alternative to the sin of adultery. Closing verses, Proverbs 5. Remember, God observes everything. For a man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all their paths. I think most of us, I can't imagine why you'd be here tonight, except for the fact that you love God. And you're drawn to worship and praise and study and learn because you want to live a life that pleases Him. And I don't like the idea of just, God is watching, but He does see everything. And that should inspire us to want Him to see us at our best, instead of seeing us making decisions that hurt Him and hurt others, and they hurt us too. I think about Hebrews 13:4, let marriage be held in honor among all. Let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulteress. God sees, and He knows. We can't hide things from Him. We can hide things from other people. We can't hide from God. It's foolish to think you can commit this sin and get away with it. You might be able, again, to hide it from others, but you can't hide it from God, and you can't hide it from yourself. It's hard for me to understand how people live with the knowledge. Lay down next to somebody that they've been married to for 25 years, knowing that they're running around with someone else. I don't know how you live with that. Proverbs 6:20 through 35, the wise teacher returns to this subject in the next chapter. We see it in chapter 5. We see it again here in chapter 6. He begins by pleading with the young man to pay attention, to never forget the teachings of his father and mother, especially where adultery is concerned. He points out the danger of engaging in a sinful relationship with a married woman. As bad as it is to steal food, it's sometimes understandable and forgiven, but stealing someone else's wife, I mean, it sounds like he's saying, well, that could get you killed. And yet, even if adultery doesn't cost your life, it can cost you dearly. I think about David. We mentioned David and Bathsheba, and all those well-known details of what happened in that story. And he's confronted and he repents. But you know, one writer said that up to that point, his life was on this kind of meteoric rise in power and popularity. It just seemed like everything he did resulted in success and blessings. But from 2 Samuel 11 on, see, here's the thing, and I want to say this. I think that no matter what you've done, I believe that you can come back to God. I believe that you can be forgiven. What I don't believe, and I think the Bible would support this, I don't believe that just because God forgives the sin means that he magically takes away all of the consequences. I don't read anything in the Bible that says when God forgives, he then rescues you from the natural consequences that come as a result of your sin. And we see the beginning of this when David and Bathsheba's infant son dies. But then we continue to see kind of the disintegration of family life. His son Amnon, terrible things that he does to sexually assault his half-sister Tamar. And then Tamar's full brother, you can understand, he's outraged by what Amnon did, and so he conspires to have Amnon killed, and then he's sent away and he comes back and there's rebellion and David almost loses the kingdom. I don't think anybody could convince us that David wasn't forgiven. We all believe that God forgave David. But what God didn't do is rescue him from the fallout of his sin. It's a sad story. And I think its message, along with the verses we're looking at in Proverbs, is clear. But when it comes to the consequences of adultery, and this is kind of our theme tonight, don't be foolish. You know, part of the folly of sin, part of the madness of it, is that we've seen the same story, the story of David and Bathsheba, the story of a man who goes after another man's wife. We've seen it end disastrously over and over and over again. Politicians and athletes and movie stars, and they all think they're going to get away with it, and none of them do. And here's the real madness. We think we can. We think, unlike all those other people, we'll be sneaky enough, we'll be smart enough, we're going to get away with it. You're not going to get away with it. And I think the reason this is the book of Proverbs, is a father talking to his son, and he's saying, here's one of the things, son, you got to be careful, you got to be smart, don't blow it in this area. I think all the time about the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, the boastful pride of life. How many Christians have failed because of sex, money, and ego? And for some reason, you know, it's like, why aren't we talking more about some of these things? I guarantee you this isn't going to be the feel-good sermon of the summer. I apologize. I get it, but we've got to have some of these conversations. Somebody talked about, instead of having an ambulance parked at the bottom of the cliff, why don't we build a fence at the top? I think we need to get back into teaching preventative. You know, think about sports medicine. You have rehab, but they have preventative medicine. What do you do to prevent painful, we're talking about spiritual harm? Well, we got to teach some of these things. In Proverbs 7, 1 through 27, another entire chapter devoted to the warning to young men against adultery. You get the feeling like he's saying, "I'm not sure you're getting it. I'm not. Let's go at it one more time." There's this abundance of material on the subject, a clear indication, I think, of both its danger as well as, how prominent it is. What the teacher describes is almost like a one-act play, a scene that he's actually witnessed. He kind of looks out the window of his house, a young man lacking sense, hanging out near the house of a forbidden woman, again, defined as an adulteress with smooth words. She lures him, not only with her provocative dress, but also with her assurances. Her husband's not at home, he's away. Her readiness, to engage in this relationship. The result, he follows her. Notice, as an ox goes to the slaughter, as a stag is caught fast till an arrow pierces its liver, as a bird rushes into a snare, he does not know that it will cost him his life. The teacher's admonition is the same as before. Don't go there. Don't do it. Pay attention. Realize where this will end. Your spiritual demise. Today, I left mine in the car. But this adulterous woman, this alluring, come along with me, no one will know, a lot of people carry that invitation around in their back pocket in the form of a cell phone. This idea of the internet and the temptation that I think the writers of Proverbs had no idea at that time what we would have access to. I'm talking about what some have described as virtual adultery. And virtual adultery refers to the use of internet pornography that is so easily accessible. Mike, I wonder if you were at OC when Prentice met her. I mean, this is over 30 years ago, and I remember it's affordable, it's accessible, it's anonymous. That was one of the keynote lectures. Over 30 years, and now the access that people have through the internet is exponentially more threatening than it ever was back then. Somebody says, well, how does viewing pornography, how does that equate with, well, Jesus in Matthew 5:28, I think, makes that pretty clear. When he says, whoever looks at a woman with lust or lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And there's no question that viewing pornography is looking at a woman with the intent to lust. Otherwise, who would do it? And just think what this sort of irresponsible behavior can do to a marriage. If you're continually desiring someone other than your wife or your husband, and it's shocking the percentage of, there was a time you would think that was predominantly a masculine sin. It's not. It runs both ways. It's bound to affect your marriage negatively. No husband or wife can compete with the visual images, nor should they be expected to. How unfair and how disloyal is that? And yet how prevalent, how easily accessible. Virtual adultery is nothing less than emotional infidelity. Just as serious, I believe, and sinful as physical adultery. Virtual adultery is real adultery, not a lesser form of it. It's often a gateway to the real thing. Here's some things I want you to think about if this has become an issue in your life. The thought of, I appreciate the prayer, and I always appreciate when somebody prays for me before I preach. If the only thing people get out of a lesson like this is a sense of condemnation, I mean, there's got to be a way of coming out of and coming back from. And the encouragement is, if you're involved with this, listen, stop. Stop it completely. Stop it immediately. No excuses, no delays, no working on it. There are things that you can put on your phone. There's some young men who they've used me as a contact. I don't want to go into too much detail because people know people I know, and I don't want to give anybody away, but I'll get a text on my phone if they're looking something they shouldn't be looking at, and it's called accountability. Here's the thing that's so hard about this. It's filled with so much shame that the people who need help are afraid to ask for help because they don't want anybody knowing what they're doing. But you got to stop. And you got to stop now. And if you can't stop by yourself, you got to ask somebody for help. I love this definition of intimacy. The absence of anxiety in the presence of vulnerability. We need church families like that, where people can be vulnerable, but they don't feel anxious because they know they're with people they can trust. Ask God to forgive you and to strengthen you against this. The good news is He will. You may not have the power to stop, but He has the power to overcome anything that's going on in your life. Can I just say that all of this thrives in darkness? But when we bring it into the light, we have a chance for victory. Get whatever outside help you may need. And I already mentioned some of this. Go to a minister. Go to a Christian friend. Go to a professional. I'm sorry. These things pop in my head. The young priest was listening to his first confessional, and the old priest afterwards, he said, any advice? He goes, yeah, next time don't go, wow. That's not helpful. That didn't help at all. I shouldn't have told it. I did. But it's like, if we're so amazed, I preached something like this, and a sweet lady, I thought, how naive can you be? Do you think we have a problem with that here? Are you kidding me? You think there isn't anybody struggling with some of what we're talking about from God's Word? Of course they are. And if we act like it's so foreign that we can't talk about these things, where are they supposed to go to get help? The last one, take Solomon's advice and work at strengthening your marriage. Some of this probably is symptomatic of the fact that we haven't invested in our marriage. The stronger your marriage is, the less vulnerable you're going to be to some of these temptations. The best advice I can give, and is there a final slide? There it is. Don't get involved in it, any form of it, virtual, physical. you will never be sorry you didn't. Can you imagine that? I can't fathom if I live long enough. Charles Williams he's 96, 97, and a couple of years ago he's a longtime minister. He's been a missionary, a domestic missionary, preached everywhere. We had a retirement party for him, and the next day he beat us all into the office. I was like, what is this guy? 97. Can you imagine sitting around 97 going, oh, back when I was 30? I wish I wouldn't. I don't think anybody's ever going to be sorry that they resisted the temptation to engage in this sin, and you will definitely be sorry. You will definitely be sorry. I meet people all the time. What was I thinking? It was a good marriage. They were happy. They've heard, they got kids that won't talk to them. I know this. I know that God loves us dearly. I said this in a sermon a while back. Sometimes we struggle with habit. And then we start feeling ashamed, and it's like, how can I come to God for forgiveness when I've already come to Him? He's already forgiven me. I don't deserve it. And I just want to say this. You didn't deserve it the first time. You don't deserve it this time, and you're not going to deserve it the next time. You understand there's no song in our songbook called Amazing Justice? That'd be a bad song. But there's one called Amazing Grace. And I'm not sure we understand how amazing that grace is. I've heard a lot of teaching on Romans 6. Should we continue in sin that grace might abound? God forbid. But I'm not sure I've heard as much teaching on Romans 5, where sin abounds, grace abounds more and more. And for those who have been fooled, and for those who have been foolish, I want to recommend to you the abounding grace of God. I hope there's something tonight that has encouraged you and helped you, or at least stirred you up to love and good works. I appreciate the time together.
All right, we want to thank them. Amen. What a great lesson, wonderful lesson, great encouragement for everyone, young and old. I saw some of the young people going, oh, this hurts, but we need to know it. We need to remember it. We need to keep that in mind. It's very important. Thank you. Thank you for your ministry. Thank you for the heart that you have for the Lord and for sinners. All right, we're dismissed. Thank you.